How's it going, super friends? Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a gargantuan review of 5 DC Icons figures. I know I'm late with this one because these are all ancient figures by action figure release date standards, but better late than never. I do want to point out that obviously as a big Superman fan, I've already got this figure mint on card, and I have one that was open, and I decided to try and customize him. I repainted him, and the blue turned out fabulous. This is such a perfect Superman blue. However, at some point, this happened. I don't even know how it happened, but a big scuff on the S, and I am not nearly talented enough to try my hand at repainting this S and actually making it look good, so I scrapped the whole deal and just bought another one. It was a work in progress. It failed. What you gonna do? So I'm gonna do this review as quick as I possibly can, which means I'm gonna skip the whole let's take them out of the package part and get right to the figures. So as quick as you can say, Bob's your uncle, Susan your aunt, they're out of the packaging. Isn't that amazing? It must be my metahuman abilities. So Swamp Thing, Mr. Miracle, John Stewart Green Lantern, and Deadman are all characters that I never owned previously, with Superman being, obviously as I've said, the only one that I've ever previously purchased. So this is a real treat for me. Before Christmas, Big Bad Toy Store was like, we're having a sale! And I went on over there, and I was like, dude, let's add these to the cart, clickety click click, and they arrived at my house like 4 weeks later. Sorry, there was a Canada Post strike and these took forever! So now that they're out and in front of me, let's take a brief look at each one individually. Deadman comes with this here extra set of hands. These seem like your typical standard issue DC Icons second set of hands. And this extra Deadman kind of rubber squishy possessy head that you can actually use to stick on another figure, and it's like Deadman has possessed that character. That's really creepy. That looks like something out of a horror movie. This figure has a very cool look to it, and I feel like with the color palette and the sculpt, they absolutely nailed it with this version of Deadman. This is my absolute favorite version of Deadman that I own. I actually only own 2. I also own the DC Direct version, which I'll compare him to in just a second. The paint apps for Deadman's face look absolutely fantastic, and the sculpting detail all around looks really, really great. The paint is crisp. It's where it's supposed to be, when it needs to be there. I like the look of this figure. It kind of looks like he's like a person with no skin and just the muscle exposed. Looks fantabulous all around. Certainly very, very happy with this one. Next we have Superman, who comes with his lovable robot servant from the Fortress of Solitude, Kellex. There's actually more than one of these robots, so technically if you buy multiples of him and collect more than one of these, that's actually fairly accurate to the comics because there's usually more than one of these guys kind of going around in the background. He also comes with the extra set of grabby sort of flight hands. Let's see if we can get these babies in focus. There we go. Extra set of grabby flight hands like that. Again, I see these as typical DC Icon standard second set of hands with the fingers kind of open. And then of course we have the figure, and in my opinion this Superman figure is absolutely one of the gems of the DC Icons line. For one, it's probably one of the best Superman figures ever made just because of the look, the sculpt, the articulation. This certainly is an outstanding example of what is possible with the Superman figure. However, in my opinion, it's not perfect because I would have preferred a slightly lighter color blue. I know that in this video it's not showing up exactly how I'm seeing it. It's actually showing up a little bit lighter because of how the camera's picking up the lighting, but this really is a little bit darker blue than what I'd be used to. But the sculpting detail for this figure is absolutely fantastic. The boots look great. The muscle tone looks fantastic. The belt, Superman's belt, I think this is a perfect example of his belt. You got his abs, you got the big bulgy chest, the S on his chest, the cape tucked into the neckline there, and then the face sculpt for this figure, not as fantastic as I would have liked. However, I guarantee had they have actually done the eyes better with this figure and actually painted the eyebrows on properly, this figure's head would have looked a whole lot better. When I see people wanting to customize this figure, the head is the one thing they all complain about. I don't like the head of this figure. I want to change it. If I do have any complaints about this figure, it's that the groin of this figure, in order to get him in flight poses, they actually made the groin a little bit lower so he could get his legs a little bit further up. And they did not employ the drop hinges like they do in the later waves of the DC Icons figures. Also, I would have preferred that Superman's S on his chest not have the black lines separating the yellow from the red. I just feel like it looks like a Superman t-shirt at that point, and I would have preferred that the S on the back of his cape have less of a yellow space around it. But overall, again, I think this is a fantastic Superman figure, and if you're a Superman collector, this, in my opinion, is going to be one of the must-have pieces that you need to get. Here we have John Stewart, who is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most overlooked but best bang for buck DC Icons offerings to date. I say that like they're going to offer more. No, the DC Icons are dead. That line is gone. But I certainly think that this was one of the best ones that they gave us. Not the suit that I would have chose to put John in, but what are you going to do? This is the one that they felt was the most iconic. And as you can see, he comes with a plethora of stuff. For one, he comes with this fantastic lantern accessory, and it's got the lantern sculpted on the top. You can see through it. There's light that gets through. Fantastically sculpted. Probably the DC Icons lantern accessory is my favorite lantern accessory to come with any of the Green Lantern figures. He comes with this little green energy construct that comes out of his ring, a basic raw blast or dispersal of energy that, again, will fit into his ring hand, some more posable Green Lantern ring energy that would pop out of his ring hand, and then the fabled ring hand, which I keep talking about. This is where all the constructs go. They just fit right in there, like this, and this. And also this. They fit perfectly in that little tiny hole. And let's not forget the two hands that he comes with that don't have any gloves on them. They're just his bare hands and forearms. Let's put those on now, just so they can see what they look like. All right. On you go. And you too. And there we go. Here's what it looks like when you have the forearms and hands changed on this figure. I'm not so much a fan of the bare forearms with this character. I do prefer the white gloves, but I wanted to show you because it is much more of a drastic change than, say, just changing the hands like a regular DC Icons figure. I'm going to put the white gloves back on now. The figure itself looks really, really cool. I'm very impressed with the sculpting detail. They actually did sculpt the lines of his suit on down there and over his feet, and the same thing with his chest. This is all sculpted, tooled on detail for this character, so he looks fantastic. I like the build of this figure. I feel like he's buff enough, he's big enough to be John Stewart Green Lantern, and they've captured the overall look of the character quite nicely, and he's painted pretty clean. The symbol on his chest could be a little neater, but it's not anything that I would ever complain about. It still looks pretty fantastic. John's head sculpt also looks fantastic. I think that it captures the look of John Stewart Green Lantern really, really nicely, and it's a good size and a fit for the body. So this figure overall really does look quite fantastic, and it's one of those ones where I'm like, why did I wait so long to buy it? Because money and other squeakier wheels, I guess. But yeah, overall like him very much. Let's go on to the next one. Next we have Mr. Miracle, who comes in his new 52 attire, complete with 2 arrow discs, mother box, and 2 extra hands. Taking a closer look at the arrow discs, they're yellow and the background's yellow. What are you going to do? Anyhow, you can see they've got these little nubs here, those little foot pegs you can stick on his feet and have him hover around. You'll see those a bit later in the video, but here's what they look like close up. Here's that little tiny weensy mother box. I'm so glad that he came with this. This is so perfect as a Mr. Miracle accessory. I mean, so were the arrow discs, but still, this is very cool. Now I have a mother box for my DC Icons figures. And he comes with the obligatory second set of hands, and I'm sure that they can hold the mother box quite adequately. Oh, holy jeez, the mother box just flew out of my hand while I was trying to stick it in the little tiny Mr. Miracle hand, and it flew to the worst possible corner of my review area. Seriously. It's down here under my desk in this back corner. What the heck? Let's check. Will it fit? Will it? Can he hold it? Nope, he can't. Hand number 2. Will it actually, can you hold it? Will you hold on to it? Nope. Okay, well, it would have been cooler if he could actually hold on to the mother box rather than just having to pose it in his hand like that with him in a stationary position, but meh. Now the overall look of the fig itself, I'm not going to lie, I was not a massive fan of the New 52 look for Mr. Miracle. Later on in the New 52, before Rebirth, they did give him a more classic look. This was, hey, let's make Mr. Miracle try to look real cool. And yes, this is not a terrible look, but I definitely prefer the classic looking Mr. Miracle over this one. And the cape for this figure also kind of drove me nuts. I know that Mr. Miracle's cape does classically stick up like that. This cape kind of stinks, not gonna lie. But I have to hand it to them. When they painted this figure, at least the paint went on nice and neat. Shiny paint is very, very hard to apply compared to regular matte paint. And this looks fantastically clean, especially for the fact they use shiny paint. All of my DC Collectibles New 52 figures in that 7-inch scale, whenever they have shiny paint, there's a good chance they are sloppy as heck. One of the cool things about this figure, though, is that all the details are sculpted in. There's lines that have been sculpted in, and this is a pretty fabulous head sculpt in general. It's, again, not the Mr. Miracle I prefer, but they still did a fabulous job of it. But again, all these lines here, they're all sculpted on. They could have just as easily painted them, and they said, nah, let's sculpt every single one of these details onto the figure. So, you know what? I gotta hand it to them for that as well. The clean paint apps and all of the new sculpting tooling detail. It looks great. Next, Swamp Thing, who is an absolutely fabulous figure that comes with Cranius, the crawling head with a trailing sack, and 2 extra hands. These ones right here. They're blurry. Now they're in focus. Now they're in focus bigger. And again, it seems like it's so common and stock to have an extra set of hands with the fingers open in kind of like a pose like this. See what I mean? All open and grabby. So that's like a stock DC Icons thing. Well, I already knew this, but this is just, oh, I dropped one. Next scene. Cranius up close looks absolutely fantastic. They've done a wonderful job of sculpting him, and the fact that they've got that shiny paint as well on him really does help with the overall look of Cranius. I really like this, and the face detail on Cranius is painted really nice as well. It's not sloppy, it's not messy. You got some 2 tones in the veins there. This is an excellent little accessory there, and I'm glad they included it. And of course we have the figure, Swamp Thing, who looks absolutely fantabulous. I can't stress it enough. DC Collectibles did a fantastic job bringing the overall look of Swamp Thing to life. I was definitely on the fence about this one for a while because I just didn't really know if he looked quite right for my liking, but having this guy in hand and seeing him even closer, I really, really like this. This is a fantastic figure. Look at the detail work in the toes and the paint apps there and all the sculpting detail for this guy. He just looks marvelous. He looks really, really nice. You got the different shadings of green there, the sculpting detail of the veins and the roots, and looking up close at that head sculpt, he just looks marvelous. Look at those pupils. They've done a great job capturing the look of the Swamp Thing. This sculpt is absolutely fantastic. Love this head sculpt so much. Honestly, really like this figure too, and I only wish that we had a Constantine figure to go with Swamp Thing and Deadman. How cool would that have been to see an actual realization of all 3 of those characters together? Personally, it still saddens me that we didn't get to see the Blue Beetle Booster Gold Buddy 2-pack, the Catwoman, the Etrigan the Demon, the Deadshot, the Sinestro, the Captain Marvel, Shazam. That makes me so sad that we didn't get to see those figures made because they all looked fantastic. Now, because DC Collectibles had a standard set of articulation for all of their Icons figures, I'll just do the articulation for John Stewart, and that will be a basic idea of what they all could do, with the exception that John Stewart and Swamp Thing had the newer drop hinge articulation. All the rest of the articulation is going to be pretty much the same. For one, all of their heads were on these ball pegs, which could obviously go around full circle as if someone punched their head on backwards, but there never was usually a whole lot of up and down movement, so that made flight poses kind of sucky. You had the shoulders, which were on swivel hinges, bicep swivels, double jointed elbows. These were all standard for the line. Some of the characters had articulation at the top of the glove, giving it full rotation. They all had the full rotation at the wrists, as well as a hinge, which again was standard for the line. For torso articulation, they all had a ball peg up inside their body, which more often than not really didn't give that much of a range of movement. And then instead of a typical ab crunch, they had what I call the backwards ab crunch, and that gave a little bit of movement, but typically in the torso, these figures didn't have a massive range of movement, and there was absolutely no waist swivel, which ticked off the fans a whole lot. But the groins were on ball joints, as you can see, and a lot of them had the drop hinges because they figured out to get a figure in a decent flight pose, you had to have the ball joint. Otherwise, they ended up like Superman having a big space in their groin, or like Mr. Miracle and Deadman with a whole lot less articulation. With it, without it. See, there's a big difference. Pull that drop hinge out, and the whole world opens up to you. The Icons also have as a standard double jointed knees, as well as having the ankle pivots that everybody loves, with a hinge that can go down and it can also spin. So posability from the waist down with a lot of the Icons was superior, while the torso of these figures did present some pretty serious limitations. So for our comparisons, and we'll start with Superman, we have 2 Multiverse Supermans from Mattel, only this one technically is made on a DC Universe Classics buck, and this one is on the new Multiverse multiverse buck. On this side, we have the classic DC Direct missing a row of abs Superman, and on this side oh, he fell over. That was a thing with these ones. They didn't like to stand up. Stay put. And on this side, we had the newer long Gorilla Arms DC Essentials Superman figure. And of course, we have to put him next to the body buck for the DC Icons Rebirth Superman figure. And here's Mr. Miracle in between the DC Universe Classics version and the DC Direct Jack Kirby version. Between them, he just looks like a little tiny fella. Here's Deadman next to the only other Deadman that I own from the DC Direct Brightest Day series. And here's John Stewart with the DC Universe Classics version on this side and the much older DC Direct version on the other side. And here's Swamp Thing next to literally the only other Swamp Thing figure in the house. I bought this for my son like a year ago. It's the Justice League action version. So there we have it. We've looked at all 5 of these DC Icons action figures and their accessories. In this case, Kel-X, the Ballsack Handhead, and all of the different Green Lantern constructs, the bazillions of extra hands. We've done it all in about the same amount of time that I would usually take to do a 1 or 2 action figure review. The one that I'm overall most pleased with is Swamp Thing. After that, it's John Stewart, Deadman, and then Mr. Miracle. I'm not counting Superman on account of the fact that I clearly already like him, as I mentioned before, and I've got a few of them already. I just put him in the video because I never did a review of him in the past. While some people absolutely love the DC Icons line and feel like they have the perfect amount of articulation and posability, other folks, myself included, feel like this is definitely not the kind of articulation that I would prefer in an action figure. I'll take a waist swivel and an ab crunch over a ball peg that barely moves and an underneath ab crunch any day. Unless, of course, the DC Icons version of an ab crunch is actually working properly and giving you lots and lots of mobility, in which case I still don't like the ball peg in the chest, at least not in the DC Icons, because it never gives you enough of a range of motion to feel like it's really serving any kind of purpose at all. But still, I loved this action figure line. I was sad to see it go, and it is what it is. It didn't last. I also must say that I do feel like the DC Icons line had superior sculpting detail in comparison to the DC Essentials action figures, which I really do like very much, but these ones, in my opinion, are absolutely of a higher quality. Add to that the fact that most of the DC Icons came with a reasonable amount of accessories, some came with more than others. Bang for buck, I feel like these guys were great. Not quite my size, I would have preferred them to be just a little bit bigger, but I think that these were pretty darn awesome. Anyhow, that is my review. Thank you so much for tuning in to watch it. I really appreciate that. If you made it this far, clearly you must have liked it, so bop it with a like. You know what that big red subscribe button's for. You can click that too. Ding the bell if you want to get notified of when I put out new videos. Leave any comments you have down in the comments section below. And as always, super friends, thank you so much for clicking on this video and tuning in and watching. Thank you so much. See you next time.